Sveiki gyvi visi čia taip gausiai susirinkusiai ir man labai malonu pristatyti šios Vilniaus knygų mugės svečią, rašytoją iš Ukrainos Oksaną Zabužko ir jos knygą Užmirštų, sekretų muziejus. Šią knygą į lietuvių kalbą vertė Zita Marienė, išleido leidykla Alma, littera. Na, iš tikrųjų, malonu matyti jūs visus čia susirinkusius tikrai dėl to, kad tai yra knyga, apie kurią galima kalbėti įvairiausiais rakursiais, apie ją galima kalbėti dėl įvairiausių priežasčių. Visų pirma, bent jau mano įsitikinimu, tai yra knyga, kuri yra iš tikrųjų labai reikšminga literatūriniu požiūriu, nes tai yra iš tikrųjų labai toksai sodrus tekstas, literatūriniai pokypiai čia atveria įvairiausias gelmes ir tai galima sakyti kaip šeimos epo, tai galima skaityti kaip knygą, kuri keliauja istoriją atgal. Žodžiu, tai yra iš tikrųjų labai išraiškinga, labai svarbi literatūra ir ne veltui ant knygos viršelio galite pamatyti, kad tai apibūdinama kaip knyga, kuri verta Nobelio literatūros premijos autoriaus. Na, apie ją tikiuosi susidarysite kiekvieną savo įspūdį. Na ir tai yra knyga svarbi ir dėl kitos priežasties, nes mes kaip žinia šiandien kalbame apie karą Ukrainoje ir ši knyga, bent jau mano įsitikinimu, gali labai gerai padėti suprasti, kas iš tikrųjų vyksta Ukrainoje, kaip prie viso to ėjo ir kokios yra giluminės to priežastis. Nes ši knyga, kaip jau sakiau, apriepia 70 metų Ukrainos istoriją ir rodo, kad iš tikrųjų tas istorijos ratas sukasi, istorija kartojasi ir tai, ką mes matome dabar, jau buvo anksčiau. Ir tos karo priežastys iš tikrųjų ateina iš praeities ir apie tai pasakoja šioje knygoje autorė ir pasveikinkime autorę atvykusią čia į Vilnių. Na, šį renginį moderuosiu aš, Audrius Ožalas. So, hello, Oksana, and...
Labas vakaras.
And let's start with our first question. I think many people sitting here in this hall remember last year and the day the war started in Ukraine. And many of these people, I think, also have been in Vilniaus book fair because now many people gathered here last year hoping to read books, to talk about books, but the war has started. And many of these people, of course, we will gladly say where we were at that day, what we remember from this day. And as I read in one of your interviews with you, and you said that you were in Warsaw that day, we were sitting in the hotel, and all these things just happened.
No, I was not sitting in the hotel, I'm sorry. I was very much asleep in my bed when I was awakened with the phone call from home.
And do you remember the emotions that day and how these emotions changed during this year? You know, because at the beginning, I think everybody was afraid, it was anger, and how all these changed during this year?
Why do you think it changed?
Because I was talking with Andriy Luka, Ukrainian writer, and he said at the beginning it was fear, it was anger, but later it was, you know, just, he said right now he feels just emptiness.
Well, in terms of how you feel after a year of the extermination war, well, of course, I mean, of course it changes because you can't be on this top of the stress where you are when you are caught with this first news. Well, but it is rather, you know, I mean, it's interesting from the psychological point of view because, yes, through this year, you know, Ukrainian society has been through these waves of ups and downs, and of course, you know, the big release, the first big release came, the first big relief came after we have won the battle for Kyiv. While there was still unclear, you know, for the first weeks, there was still unclear, you know, whether Kyiv stands or falls. Well, this was totally different temperature of emotion. Then when, you know, we realized that no way, you know, and no matter what all those all-knowing Western experts who were giving us 72 hours before we fall down under Russia again, and they will be able to sleep calmly in the night. Here I literally quote one British media which was inviting me last year in January to take part in the discussion how better to pacify Putin, and should Ukraine be neutral, should Ukraine refuse from our ambitions to join NATO, or well, should we all understand Putin's troubles with having the NATO missiles in his backyard, as it was put. We were backyard. We used to be, a year ago, that changed a lot. We used to be seen as Russia's backyard, some suburbia of Russia. I think I don't need to explain this in Lithuania, because you are much smaller, of course, and you know better how to be described as a suburbia of some bigger empires. So, yeah, so this changed, and after, you know, it appeared that they were all wrong, after we have proved ourselves, our army, you know, and our entire society, entire population proved how wrong they were, of course, it gave a totally different feeling of, I don't know, self-confidence, I would say, something like this. Self-confidence, that's a difference, yes, compared to this, you know, very first reaction.
And you spent almost all the year speaking to Western media and to Western people about what's happening in Ukraine, what is Russia really is about. And in one of your interviews you said what it's the first time when Ukraine has its 15 minutes in the world press, and that for once you have a chance to tell who you are. Yes, but do you think what Western countries finally realized what Russia is about? Because when I've been to Frankfurt Book Fair and I've talked to organizers and they said, okay, Ukrainian colleagues just thought many years ago what Russia is really about, and Russia is going to invade us, and so on and so on, and nobody didn't listen to them, yes? And they say, right now we are listening to them. Do you think that the Western people and Western countries are really listening right now?
Well, of course, this time, you know, well, it's a kind of a, it may be put down, and maybe one day will be by some future writers or future historians, you know, some 30 years after we will win the war. We have not yet won the war, it would remind you, yeah? So maybe some 30 years after or 50 years after, you know, it will be described, you know, as this kind of a funny story when Ukraine was trying to make herself heard just 3 times in this century. We were having this Orange Revolution, Maidan of 2004, which was quite a clear message from the Ukrainian civil society to the world that Ukraine is not Russia and does not want to belong to the Russian sphere of influence. And the first reaction of the world was like, wow, look at them, you know, they fight for democracy, and how interesting. Well, and then, you know, it fades. This 15 minutes of attention, you know, it fades down. Well, and then again, all the looks go to Russia, and the discussions in the broad media shift to more or less like, okay, if Ukrainians could make it, fighting for the democracy and winning, you know, their right to the fair elections, well, then it means that one day Russians will be able to do it also. The question why? And what is the what kind of logic, you know, makes people believe that if Ukrainians could make it, then one day Russia will also become a democracy? Well, that's of course an enigma, you know, for a Ukrainian mind. But if you know how the history of Ukraine has been presented in Slavic, so-called Slavic studies in all the Western universities, and how Russo-centric the entire vision of this part of the world has been remaining, you know, since times of the, since times of the Nabokov's Pnin. Yes, it is still, you know, the Nabokov's Pnin who explains that Russia started in Kiev. Not at all embarrassed with the fact that there was no Russia then, and Moscow was not even a speck on the map, you know. Then second time, Maidan 2013-2014, and again, you know, the attention to Ukraine gets replaced with the shift of interest to Russia, Northway, like, okay, what does really Putin want? Maybe he has his reasons, you know, to beware what was going on Maidan, and are they fascists? Are they neo-Nazis? Do they really discriminate Russian language? And then you get, you know, this influx and avalanche, you know, of Western correspondents traveling to Ukraine to find out whether you discriminate or not, you know, Russian literature, and getting very disappointed to find out that, on the contrary, it is still Ukrainian language that is discriminated on this, you know, level of commercial representation. And then the third time, it's a war, yes, and with the war, finally, this basic stereotype of this big Russia, of this, you know, world's leading power, compared to which we are all small suburbs, backyards, or whatever. This entire myth of the grand Russia, of the great Russia, the entire myth of Russian greatness was broken with the resistance of the Ukrainian army. And to quote one of the, I think, American experts who said that we were thinking that Russia has the second army in the world, and it appeared to be only second army in Ukraine. So if it turns to be so, then of course that's the way you finally make yourself heard. And then this awakens an interest to your culture, literature, and to what you are, and then, okay, like you get a mic for the whole year, you know. It's been this, you know, Western attitudes changing, and you know, West discovering this, in fact, you know, biggest country of Europe, this forgotten Atlantis of Europe, so to speak. So I keep saying that we are all, you know, beneficiaries of the victories of the Ukrainian army. Glory to the Ukrainian army.
And I'm talking about the Russians' perspective. Last year, Svetlana Alexievich was in Vilnius, and when visiting Vilnius, she said what Putin didn't surprise her, but surprised Russian people who just went to war. They don't go to protests, and they, even when coffins arrive to Russia, they don't do anything. Did the Russians surprise you, or did you expect like that?
You know, I think in a way they surprised everyone, because, you know, there is such thing as wishful thinking. We knew it was bad in Russia. We knew it was this neo-totalitarian state or neo-Orwellian state living on the fake reality created by the TV. And we were watching very closely how they were creating this fake reality since 2014 and imposing it upon the audience. I mean, that's something new, that's something the dictatorships of the 20th century were not familiar with. Hitler was not having a TV, Stalin wasn't having an internet. They were much more limited, you know, in their resources as compared to Putin nowadays. Well, so we knew that, yes, it is a kind of a, you know, this mass, I don't know, stupefying mass, kind of, yes, inflicted mental disability, so to speak, that they spread via TV. But we did not know that it went that far, that like nothing left, like no signs of life. I mean, yeah, of course there are decent people, there are always some Winston Smiths using, you know, speaking in terms of Orwell's 1984. There are always some Winston Smiths, you know, who try to be decent and who try to be critical with regard to reality, but they are totally powerless, they are helpless, and the only recommendation you can give them is to leave the country, you know. So it's not an easy lot to preserve your sanity in the lunatic asylum. And this is a plot which has been already, you know, which already was appearing in literature of the 20th century. The closest parallel, I would say, is Ionesco's Rhinoceros. You know, why the majority of people turns into rhinoceros and some don't, and how uncomfortable those who did not become rhinoceros, how uncomfortable and unprotected and helpless they might feel. I mean, so there is, I don't see, you know, any real powers within Russia that are able to resist, except for some coup d'etat. Well, that's the most realistic prospect, and I guess that's something we are going to see in the not too distant future.
And by the way, speaking about the same Alexievich, in that discussion in Vilnius, she was asked, would she kill Putin if she had an opportunity? And she said no. And what's your answer would be, for example, Putin sitting somewhere here, a fan of literature, Lithuanian literature, what would you do?
Well, my reaction would have been that of aversion. You know, just the reaction of aversion. And I mean, killing Putin won't solve the problem. Killing Putin won't, you know, cure millions of Russians from this grand mental disturbance. It won't. No, I mean, it is not the solution. And I mean, nothing more naive and nothing more, I would say, cowardly in intellectual terms on the part of the collective West than believing that it is one man's war, that it is just Putin's war, that were it not for Putin, you know, it wouldn't have happened. And this is really, I don't know, yes, I describe it as an intellectual cowardice, because otherwise, yes, it is too fearful to recognize that, hey guys, you did it again. exactly the same way that Hitler and the rise of Nazism was overlooked by Europe back in the 30s, when everyone wanted to pacify Hitler, to give him, I don't know, Rhineland, Sudetenland, Austria, whatever, give him whatever he wants so that we could sleep, so that we could have peace and a nice solid sleep in the night, you know. So again, the same story repeated itself, and where the hell you guys were looking for the past 30 years? Okay, 20 years. I'm speaking about 30, because this war has been in preparation for 30 years. Well, but even, you know, with Putin alone, it is since 2000. Since the year 2000, the country is led by the KGB officer. And when I say, you know, some 20 years ago to one of the leading German journalists, are you aware that it is more or less the same like Germany, where, you know, presided by the former Gestapo officer? And he looks at me, you know, with this really scared face and says, should I put this down? And he didn't. So yes, I mean, the rise of this new fascist dictatorship has been totally overlooked by the West, and the attempt at this very last moment to put, you know, or to invest all the guilt onto Putin, onto one man, okay, that's an attempt somehow to justify your own ignorance and cowardice.
Yeah, and you already started talking about the history repeating itself, and let's move to your book, and it's a grand book, and you yourself described it as a textbook on Ukraine and Ukrainian history. And you also said that Ukraine is a country which doesn't know how to speak for itself. In this book you also write that Ukraine lacks self-esteem. So is this book something kind of a way of Ukraine finding its own voice?
Well, you know this. Now that I look back, because this book appeared in Ukraine some 12 years, no, 13 already years ago.
Yeah, but it seems like this is yesterday now, because many things are really very relevant to what is happening right now.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. I know. I mean, it's being translated, and it is being translated, you know, into a number of countries. Lithuanian translation is definitely not the first, though I'm happy that my first book in Lithuanian appeared to be my magnum opus, you know, this major novel of mine. But now when I look back, you know, because the books change with years, they change with the course of the current events. And now looking back, I think it is a book about war. It is a book about how the war was, you know, growing up. To begin with, it is a book about the information war. Maybe I owe an explanation to the audience who has not yet, you know, read these 800 pages. Well, I'm sorry, you know, it is some work. Maybe I should warn in advance that once you make it through the first 400, then you start seeing that all these people are connected among themselves. And then by the end of this story, you will see that it is actually, you know, a police novel, a kind of a detective story, yeah. But yes, it is about history. It covers some 80 years of Ukraine's history, and it has this very convoluted plot. There are the members of the same family who don't know about each other and who are scattered in time. Part of the action takes place in the 40s, during and after World War II. There are characters who were the members of the Ukrainian resistance army. The parallel to the, I don't need to explain, Yevropov was Ukrainian guerrilla, Ukrainian insurgent army. You were having here in Lithuania the same, Forest Brothers. And part of the action takes place in the first years of the current century, or to be more precise, 2003, 2004, before the Orange Revolution. You know, this dark and murky year, which ended up with the outburst of the Orange Revolution. Orange Revolution is not on stage, you know, it ends before. The action ends before the Orange Revolution. And the main character from our times, 20 years ago, she's a journalist. The protagonist is a journalist, you know, who investigates. Okay, I'll skip this part, you know, because it's going to be this long Zabužko sentence. Okay. Sorry. I'm notorious, you know, these long sentences with parentheses, you know, and lasting for 2 or 3 pages or something. And Zabužko sentence, it is a term used by Ukrainian critics. It is not my invention. They call it Zabužko sentence. In fact, you know, it is about how we have lost the information war, because the first decade of this century, Russia was already at war against Ukraine, and it was an information war. It was a preparation of the public opinion, both in Ukraine and abroad, to the future dismemberment of Ukraine. All this, you know, this whole avalanche of Russian titles, Donbass в огне, Ukraina в огне, all this popadancy, this Russian fantasy, his kind of historical fantasy about guys traveling in time and finding themselves in the years of the World War II Great Patriotic War, and some dead soldiers warning them that you will still have to fight against fascism in Ukraine in your time. So all this has been, you know, these scenarios plotted, you know, years before 2014. All this was in preparation, and all this was meant to prepare the public opinion of the West to buy, you know, this legend that Ukraine is not a real country. Half of Germany was believing this, that Ukraine did not exist until 1991, that it is some kind of a failed state which never existed on its current territory, and it is totally, you know, split within itself, and people in Galicia hate people in Donbass, and vice versa, and why going on, you know, with this absolutely unnatural situation, with this bastard of Beloversky Treaty. I'm sorry, I'm now rather, you know, changing Hitler's formula about Poland being a bastard of the Weimar Treaty. So Ukraine was destined, you know, to play the role of Poland in 1939. This time it was designed for this role, and I'm trying to. I mean, I was not touching in the Museum of Abandoned Secrets. I was not touching the issue of these scenarios, but it is about an atmosphere. And yes, it is, you know, it is this insider's view of a journalist who sees, feels, experiences, every day on her working place, this forceful degradation of media. And this proved to be actually a universal trend. You know, this media, this populism, general populism, permeating media, not just in Ukraine, but all over Europe. This Putinization of media, as one Italian philosopher actually put it, Putinization of media, or Russification of media, because like in Italy, Berlusconi was the first, you know, who turned media into a kind of a, you know, political show, which in fact turned democracy into a fake. So yes, to a considerable extent, this is a book, there is a number, it is multi-plotted novel, so there is a number, you know, side stories about media and how we were losing in Ukraine, how we were losing our media and cultural independence in the first decade of this century. How this war was being cooked during these years, and how my characters actually, despite everything I've said, were not going to lose it. That's the important thing.
Yeah, but you are talking about what this book is about history, this book is about war and media, but in one of her interviews I read what actually you wanted to write a book not about history, but about a book about love.
It is a book about love. And yes, it is about, I wanted to write a book about happy love. That was, I remember this question, and I remember...
You said you wanted to write a book about unhappy love.
Happy love, yeah. Because it's much more difficult, you know, writing. My debut novel was about unhappy love, about a traumatic relationship, fieldwork in Ukrainian sex. I can't say that I've changed much in between. I mean, even though, you know, 20 years passed between fieldwork in Ukrainian sex and the Museum of Abandoned Secrets. What really interests me in my fiction, actually in my non-fiction too, is how history shows itself on this atomic, everyday level. How our past shapes our present without our awareness. How it is within us, under our skin, even though we don't know it. And yes, it does show, you know, on this elementary level, in the kitchen, in bed, wherever. You know, so it is, I would say, I dare say, you know, it is a kind of a womanly approach to history, when you are more interested, you know, in registering the details, the small things. There are lots of small things, you know, in this book, and one of the characters, you know, changed, one of the main male characters, changes his profession into the, antiquity vendor, and he is playing, you know, with these small things, being witnesses, bearing evidence of the past. And yes, you know, that's, you know, this, I would say, this everyday face of history, how it presents it to us, living inside it, long before the textbooks on grand historical narrative will be written.
Yeah, I think it's, when I was reading this book, this theme of collective memory and personal memory is also, I think, is one of the most important, but and one of the main thoughts for me, it was all we want a clean sheet. A sheet. We want just want a clean beginning, with no memory at all, with no traumas from the past, but that is impossible.
Yeah, absolutely. It's absolutely impossible. And maybe I have to explain the title, to start with explaining the title. Okay, can you just tell me how much time I still have to spend on that?
A little bit, yeah.
A little
About
bit.
3 minutes of explaining the title.
Oh my goodness, okay, so... Jesus. Okay, but still, I guess I owe you an explanation about the title, because it's in fact a metaphor. That these secrets, I don't know whether you were doing this in Lithuania. Yes?
Yes.
You were, okay. So then you remember, at least women of my generation do remember, so that when you dig a hole in the ground, you get some colored debris, you know, you make some kind of application from the petal, from flower petals, whatever, then you cover it with a piece of glass, then you cover it with the dirt, and it is a secret between the girls, between girlfriends, the secret which cannot be shown to anyone else. It is secret between us, okay? So this whole concept, you know, of this hidden history, so to speak, hidden history, hidden memories, lost history, lost memories, it's only the reader who, in the end of the book, on the last page of the book, gets the whole picture. None of the characters has the whole picture of this, you know, 70 years long story. And yes, it is, there is one of the characters, a friend of this journalist, a painter, who died in the car accident, who was having her own theory about this whole secrets game. She was believing that it was coming from the time when the Bolsheviks came and our grandmothers had to bury in the ground family icons. It's totally fictitious explanation. In fact, you know, anthropologists have their own, you know, explanations of this whole secret business. Within this book, you know, these buried icons or abandoned secrets, okay, they become a metaphor, a key metaphor that unwraps, you know, layer after layer, unwraps this abandoned history or unpronounced truth, unpronounced history. And in a way it turned out, that's why I'm saying that now, looking back, I see it as a book on this current war, just written some 12 years before its present day phase. Because this is the reason, you know, of this war, the reason why the West overlooked this new Nazism, so to speak, or neo-Orwellian threat, lies precisely in the missed lessons from the past, from the unlearned lessons of the 20th century history, from the truths that were not pronounced, from the catastrophes that were banned to mention, from all the things from the 20th century, from the bloody and bloodthirsty and dirty 20th century history that were hidden under the carpet. And here, history which we were believing belonged to the past, comes up and breaks in, burgles into our houses and says, "Hi, I am your future." So this is the story of our abandoned secrets in a way, and that makes me say and think that yes, this is a book about how the war was growing, how it was in preparation for all these years.
And you already mentioned this Zabužko sentence, and this book is written in some kind of episodic manner. And is it a way to reconstruct how humans' memory works? Mm-hmm. Like from different episodes. Mm-hmm. Coming into one whole?
Yeah, thank you. Inner monologues, rather, because there are three characters, like two of them living in our time, well, okay, the first year, 20 years ago, okay, 2003. So this is precisely this couple, a man and a woman, who have this happy love I wanted to write about. And one character from this guerrilla guy, from the 40s, who comes into the guy's lucid dreams. He reappears in the dreams. And this man, this journalist's boyfriend, does perceive these dreams as something strange, something foreign, something being inflicted upon him, not belonging, to his own memory, like some experience in somebody else's memory. So, of course, all three characters are, taking turn in their inner monologues. So be prepared for these inner monologues, and it is why these inner monologues that you discover in flashbacks. Yes, how memory works, this kind of stream of consciousness. Well, there are dialogues, there are telephone conversations lasting for 100 pages, and again, it's not just words the people exchange, but, the thoughts that they don't articulate while they speak to each other. Well, maybe that's basically due to the fact that I've been always interested not as much in what happened. It's like, the 19th century novel where author was a god, knowing everything about what happened and knowing everything about his or her characters. We live, in the age of this, post-classical physics, so to speak, where an object depends on the observer, as you know. So, yeah, story depends on who tells it, who lives through it, And what always interested me most was precisely how the events, are experienced on this inner level, on this, psychological level. So it is precisely this world of memories, dreams, and this inner stream of consciousness, that I think where literature is irreplaceable by any other art. You can't make a serial, of what's going on in your mind.
Na ir mūsų laikas pamažu jau baigėsi ir noriu paklausti, galbūt kažkas norėtų kažko paklausti apie knygą ar šiaip kažko susijusiu su šitą pokalbį. So, there are no questions from the audience, maybe. So, the last question for me is, you went to the story before Orange Revolution. Why this point? Because Orange Revolution was some kind of, the point of hope of a country to decide for itself, and why did you choose this?
Oh, it was a turning point. It was a turning point. It was like we were then speaking the birth of a nation, the birth of political nation. Like after 2000, before 2040, like we could have been described in terms of some post-Soviet republic. After 2040, no. Not anymore, because that was, the birthday of the Ukrainian civil society. We proved to be a kind of a grown-up nation. So it took us, some, from 91 to 24, 13 years, to somehow, to show. To be able to make ourselves visible as a young democracy. That's true, as a, political nation, young democracy nation, which is very much, determined to have its, to fight for its independence. It was not only about fair and free elections. It was about how you want to rule your own country for which you feel responsible. And that's something, which made an immediate, gasp between Ukraine and these other so-called Slavic republics which were designed by Kremlin scenario to make together this Orthodox empire. They are using, this. They are using the language of the 17th century. But okay, let's rather skip this part because it is going to take me another hour to lecture on the beginnings of the Russian Empire and how our forefathers actually were largely responsible for making it. So now it's our business to finish it.
Na ir kągi, atėjo laikas ir mums baigti šitą diskusiją, tikrai galėtume dar pakalbėti tikrai nemažai, nes temų yra nepaliestų labai daug, na ir kaip pati autorė sakė, 800 puslapių, tai čia turbūt reikėtų bent jau 800 minučių šitam pokalbiui, bet kągi, turime limituotą laiką ir aš tikrai labai džiaugiuosi, kad visi čia susirinkote ir tikrai labai tikiuosi, kad jums visiems tikrai patiks šitą Oksanos Zabužko knyga Užmirštų sekretų muziejus. Dėkui jums, thank you, Oksana.
In Ukrainian as well. Thank you.